Dynamic EQ is arguably my favorite method of EQing a vocal, and there's a few reasons why. The first reason is because sometimes a static EQ move is not the right approach. What do I mean by that? Well, basically, if you notch out a frequency that's problematic, that's great for when that frequency is problematic, but maybe later on in the song, the vocal performance changes. Maybe the artist changes their cadence or their tonality on the track. They go into a higher register, for example, and suddenly that frequency that you're removing is now actually important and fundamental and not necessarily creating a problem, and yet that static EQ is still getting rid of that frequency. Another reason why is because dynamic EQ tends to sound more transparent and more musical. What do I mean by that? Basically, it's way less noticeable, and it makes your track ultimately sound better and smoother because it's not constantly taking out a frequency that is sometimes, again, fundamental to a vocal performance. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is your boy 5-Piece producer and engineer extraordinaire. Thank you for checking out this video, and we're very much going to be picking up from where I left off in my previous video, how to EQ vocals. If you haven't watched that video yet, definitely give that a look, because that video is really going to be showing you how I went about identifying the frequencies that I'm going to be further manipulating in this video with dynamic EQ. Now, that being said, I've got the Pro Tools session open here. It's rent-free by my friend, Everything Ocean. Now, the first step that you want to take whenever you're going to use a dynamic EQ is, of course, you want to identify the problematic resonance or frequency that you want to reduce. In this case, I'm building on that last video, how to EQ vocals. That's where I actually identified these problematic frequencies. And I also walk through how I decided on what to reduce here and my thinking behind each of those moves. Right now, these are all static moves, right? This is a very traditional process that a lot of engineers or mixers will be approaching when mixing a vocal, but I don't want to be using a static band because, once again, this is getting rid of this frequency by a little bit more than 2 dB the entire time, and that might be great for certain moments, but then at other moments, such as when a key change occurs or whatever, if the artist goes into a higher register, singing in falsetto, for example, this might actually become problematic and not necessarily the best idea. So in that case, what I'd rather do is not use a static band, but instead I would reset my gain to 0, so I'm not actually adding or taking away or doing any of that stuff. And then I'm going to be able to right click on this band and select Make Dynamic. Now you're going to see it's going to create a little purple region in this case because that's the color of this band. And I'm going to be able to turn this down. Now what this is this is the range. This is the maximum amount of volume that you're going to be able to lose at a given point. So by me bringing it down here to -3, the most volume I can lose on this frequency is -3. Now you might be wondering, well, how does it know how much to reduce the frequency by? Well, if you press this auto button here on the Pro Q, you're now going to have access to a threshold, and you're going to want to set this threshold so that way whenever this frequency passes the threshold, only then does it actually turn it down. So really what you're doing is you're basically telling this EQ to only reduce this frequency when it is too loud and passes a threshold that you set and predetermine yourself. There are other cool ways to use a dynamic EQ, such as by using it for side chaining purposes. This is a great way to use it when there's frequency masking taking place on your track. I'll leave a link to a playlist up above right now and in the description below where I overview all of that step by step. But with that being said, let's focus on this dynamic EQ and using it for what it is here without any sidechain or anything. We're going to want to simply have this work only when this frequency, this lower frequency, ends up creating more mud, congestion, and essentially becoming too overwhelming in the mix. Just so you know what this frequency sounds like, I'll solo the band. A lot of low-end information, right? This could be important because it is really responsible for the warmth and the body of a vocal, but at the same time, it's also responsible for the muddiness and lack of clarity that you might be experiencing, and that's why I'm obviously notching this band out in the first place. Now, that being said, once we have our frequency identified, once our gain is set to 0, so we're not adding or taking away, and making sure that we have this set to being a dynamic band, of course, we're going to want to play this and then bring down the threshold to the point where this actually begins to work. You're going to see this band start to reduce this frequency and turn it down in volume. We're not necessarily going to look for a full -3 dB decrease, but instead we're going to just listen and use our ears and try to find that sweet spot where we're able to just clean up the vocal, but then not obviously thin it out in this case. So I'm going to reset this and play. Let's do it.
Yeah, I don't want to take control. I don't want to take my soul. I don't want to take my clothes. I don't want to take my door. I don't want leave me alone, leave me, oh. I don't want take my joy, I don't want take my toy, I don't want take my voice. I'ma keep making noise, I'ma keep making noise.
So really quick, you could already see that it was only reacting at certain times. It wasn't getting rid of this frequency all the time, but it was instead only reacting during certain phrases or moments in the performance, and that means it's not going to be working as aggressively and it's not going to sound so noticeable, because again, if you notch this out with a static band, you're pretty much getting rid of that frequency or reducing that frequency the entire time, and that could create problems, and in this case, because of how low it is, it might make my vocal sound thin. Now that being said, let's quickly A/B with and without this band. Pay attention here.
Yeah, I don't want take control, I don't want take my soul, I don't want take my clothes, I don't want take my door. I don't want leave me alone, leave me, oh. I don't want take my joy, I don't want take my toy, I don't want take my voice. I'ma keep making noise, I'ma keep making noise.
So hopefully you can hear the difference. It's sounding a little bit cleaner for sure, right? And again, it's way more transparent than if I was to use a static move. Now that being said, let's go into another frequency and I'll show you this example one more time. Let's go to a higher band this time. In this case, I'm gonna go around here, this 2500 area. This is really responsible for the bite, the nasal, the honk, sometimes that bad stuff that we don't necessarily want, but it's also where a lot of the vocal is concentrated. The intelligibility of a vocal or the presence of a vocal is really present here. And if we overdo it, if we get rid of too much, especially with a static EQ, your vocal might come off as less intelligible or just flat sounding and not really having that presence that you want in a mix. So that being said, same exact process. I'm going to go to the gain. I'm going to reset it to 0 in this case. I am then going to right click and turn it into a dynamic band. I'm going to accentuate the range so it goes down to about -3, but of course you could extend this even further if you really want to exaggerate the issue first. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to press auto and readdress the threshold. Let's quickly just hear this frequency. A little bit harsh, right? That's obviously what we're listening for here. So let's play this and actually dial this in.
Yeah, I don't want take control, I don't want take my soul, I don't want take my clothes, I don't want take my door. I don't want leave me alone, leave me, oh. I don't want take my joy, I don't want take my toy, I don't want take my voice. I'ma keep making noise, I'ma keep making noise.
You kind of get it, right? You can obviously hear that it's cleaning things up, but again, it's only reacting during certain moments and not others, and that's going to lead to a much more transparent sound and not over-processing. It's not going to get rid of something when it, should still be there. It's only going to get rid of that stuff that is too excessively loud and passing that threshold that you set up. Now, of course, you may want to consider reevaluating your cue here. I have pretty narrow cues for all of these bands because I really want to focus on these problematic spots. And by having a wider cue, as you can see, I'm going to be affecting more frequencies. And I don't always like that, at least not in a cut situation. When I'm cutting something, when I'm removing some information, then I obviously want to keep it a little bit more narrow and concentrated or focused. Whereas when I'm boosting something, that's when I'll gravitate towards a more wide band because that'll be perceived as more musical and transparent and sweeter, so to speak. Now, really quick, I want to do a few comparisons before we wrap this up. First, keep in mind that this is only 2 bands out of all the bands that I've created, but I'm going to put it into context and we're going to play. Let's check this out, with and without.
Yeah, I don't want take control, I don't want take my soul, I don't want take my clothes, I don't want take my door. I don't want leave me alone, leave me, oh. I don't want take my joy, I don't want take my toy, I don't want take my voice. I'ma keep making noise, I'ma keep making noise. Yeah, I don't want take control, I don't want take my soul, I don't want take my clothes, I don't want take my door. I don't want leave me alone, leave me, oh. I don't want take my joy, I don't want take my toy, I don't want take my voice. I'ma keep making noise, I'ma keep making noise.
This is definitely cleaning things up. I especially hear this lower band in the context. I can really hear how it's cleaning up that mud. And now what I want to do is I actually want to do the same comparison, but I have the original EQ here, right? This is my EQ from that previous video that I mentioned. So I have that set up and I still have my dynamic EQ as well. This right one is the dynamic, the left is the static. I'm going to just switch them over and we can hear the difference. I'll also leave a note in the bottom so you can tell which one is playing at what time. Here we go.
Yeah, I don't want to take control, I don't want take my soul, I don't want take my clothes, I don't want take my door. I don't want leave me alone, leave me, oh. I dey want take my joy, I dey want take my toy, I dey want take my voice. I'ma keep making noise, I'ma keep making noise. Yeah, I dey want take control, I dey want take my soul, I dey want take my clothes, I dey want take my door, I dey want leave me alone, leave me, oh. I dey want take my joy, I dey want take my toy, I dey want take my voice. I'ma keep making noise, I'ma keep making noise.
So they're pretty comparable, I'm not gonna lie to you. They're very close. I mean, they are the same exact frequencies that we are treating on both EQs, but of course the difference is one is doing it dynamically, and that's allowing it to actually breathe a little bit more, right? It's not just clamping down and reducing it the entire time. It's actually moving with the track, and that actually is something I can really hear here. I feel like when I'm listening to the static one, it definitely sounds clean, but it sounds sort of stiff or rigid. That's kind of the best way that I would describe it. Whereas the other one, I'm still able to treat those problems that we're addressing, but at the same time, it's breathing, it's moving because that band is coming down, taking it out, and then letting go and letting it come back to a regular state where it's not actually reducing a frequency at any given point. Now, to be fair, this video has been focused on cuts, just removing a frequency only when it becomes a problem, when it passes a threshold. You might be wondering, should you be doing the same additively? So should I be taking my boosts and also using them in a dynamic way? I don't always think you should for a vocal. I think you absolutely can. There are some benefits. For example, when you add using a dynamic EQ, it creates this movement because it's not always boosted. It's just boosting at certain moments. But the problem is the vocal or the frequency that you've selected needs to pass a threshold. And typically that means the really loud moments that are already really loud, those are the things that are triggering the dynamic EQ to then get boosted. So I don't always rely on a dynamic EQ for additive purposes, but I absolutely prefer it to a static EQ when it comes to a reduction or a cut, as you can tell here. Now, the other thing you might be wondering is, should you be using a dynamic EQ over a multiband compressor, or should you be using the multiband compressor over the dynamic EQ? When should you use one over the other? Now, truthfully, both of these processes are interchangeable in my opinion. You can go to one or the other, and I definitely use both. I definitely like to use the Pro Q here, as you can tell, because I'm usually doing a lot of other EQ moves at the same time, and it's just more convenient. I could just create a dynamic band right there with it open without having to create another plugin and do all these other steps. That being said, I will say that the multiband compressor does give you a few additional benefits. Specifically, a multiband typically gives you access to the attack, release, and other parameters that you may not be able to manipulate on every dynamic EQ. Some dynamic EQs definitely give you access to these, but not every single one does. And I would say that my Pro MB from FabFilter wins over the Pro Q3 from that perspective. Now, by the way, if you're curious to learn more about multiband compression specifically and how you can use it in your mixes to make your vocals sound smoother, I'll leave a link to a video that I did all about that up above right now and in the description below. Definitely check that out. I hope you got value out of this video. If you learned something new, if you like what you saw, definitely tap that like button until it turns blue. It'd mean a lot, and it'd help the YouTube algorithm know to show you some more of my helpful tutorials. And not only that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, definitely consider doing so, because I drop a new piece of content just like this every single week, always focused on helping you sound better and helping you make more money with your music. I'd love to help you on your journey, and I'm looking forward to helping you again on the next one. All right? Peace.
5,